We have 110 signed in for this webinar today. I'm Kenny Voss, and I will be your moderator. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar on STIP Programming 101. We have several great presenters for you today. This is the fourth webinar in our Design Webinar Training Series. Our goal with these webinars is to ensure employees receive the technical training necessary to successfully deliver projects into the future. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items to go over. We are scheduled for 2 hours today. This includes time for the presentation and time for questions and answers. We are recording today's webinar. We will place the recording in Mo.U for future reference. This webinar will also be added to the course catalog of the Program Delivery Training Program. All lines are muted during the presentation. The question and answer function will be open, so I encourage you to send your questions to all panelists in the chat pod. We will be monitoring these questions during the presentation to determine if we should break into the presentation for clarification. Before we get started, we're going to do a quick survey to get your thoughts. You can use the WebEx annotation tools on the left side of your screen to answer the question. The question for today is, what is the purpose of a statewide transportation improvement plan, or STIP? You can type your answer in the middle of the slide. So we'll take a few minutes just for you all to answer that question. All right, that's great. It looks like we're getting lots of good comments. Looks like future planning, public commitment, accountability to the public, transparency, keeping the public informed, asset management, set the budget for the future years. Those are all great ideas. So for today's webinar, like I said, we're going to have several presenters. But our first presenter I'm pleased to introduce is Eric Hurdy. He's the director of our Transportation Planning Division. At this time, I will turn it over to Eric.
That mute button. Thank you, Kenny. Everybody hear me okay? Good afternoon. Those were some great answers. What is a STIP? I will say, too, even inside MoDOT, we sometimes forget even what the acronym is. Kenny said it's the Statewide Transportation Improvement Plan. It's Statewide Transportation Improvement Program. But we've got more acronyms and more things into this STIP than you can shake a stick at. I mean, I think that the breadth of your answers about what you were talking about really it does describe what the STIP is. I mean, at its basis, it's a commitment to Missourians of what we're going to do over the next 5 years. In Missouri, When we put projects in the STIP, come hell or high water, they're not coming out. And if they do come out, it's going to be for a really good reason. So the STIP is our commitment to Missourians on what we plan to deliver over the next 5 years. There's a lot of technicality that goes into it, but in its basics, the STIP is meeting two law requirements. One is a federal requirement, and that is for a STIP. And then there's a state requirement for a road and bridge construction schedule. And the STIP checks both those boxes. If you think about the way the commission is set up, that is why there's a state law about a road and bridge schedule, because of the commission's autonomy from the legislative process, that funds stand appropriated. They wanted, our founders in Missouri wanted some accountability about what would be done with transportation revenues. And that's the road and bridge schedule. And the same came from Congress in the form of requirements for a STIP. So it does look out over 5 years. We fully fund the first 3 years of the STIP. We get targets to districts based off of a financial forecast developed by management. That all rolls down into the districts. Basically we have 9 districts. I know we have 7, but 2 of them have urban and rural areas. So there's different allocations for that based on our commission-approved funding distribution. One of the things that you'll notice, too, if you look at this STIP and you go back maybe 5 years, there's been some improvements made to the STIP, and we're always trying to improve the STIP. 2 of the major additions we've made recently was to add multimodal projects in a much more look and feel like the rest of the road and bridge schedule within there, to try and look at multimodal projects in the same vein of fully programming those first 3 years where we can. And to list out what projects will deliver in that section of the STIP. Another addition that's come to the STIP is, when you look at all the dollars that flow to MoDOT, a lot of people would say, well, where's that big pot of money you have for operations? Well, that's big pot is a relative term. But we have started to list out what those maintenance goals and projects are. If you step back from it all a little bit and you think about MoDOT's planning process and that we do a bottom-up approach where we blanket, our state is blanketed with RPCs and MPOs. These are comprised of locally elected officials, your county commissioners, your mayors. We go to them and say, hey, here's the condition of our system. Here's what we're seeing. Here's the available dollars we have to address any deficiencies in the system. What would you like to do? How does it look? And that process of bottom-up works really well to develop the STIP and makes the ultimate development of the STIP and its production a very accountable process and document. If you think about it, somebody can't call the central office and say, hey, program this job for me. We quickly, across MoDOT's board, say, well, what's your local planning partner say? What's the TAC say? What's the MPO say? Is it a priority of theirs? So umbrellaed over all this STIP is that interaction involvement that all of Team MoDOT has with our planning partners to identify what to do with the limited resources we have on unlimited need. So that's kind of where we are with the STIP. That's big umbrella view there, but that is a kind of a how we see the STIP, what we use it, but it really is the product that comes out of this global look at all the needs, the available funding that we have. How do we mesh that into programs that ultimately roll into projects in our STIP? So that's kind of high level what the STIP is. And Kenny, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, our next speaker is Monica Duncan.
All right, thank you. I'm the Transportation Planning Specialist with our statewide programming group, which coordinates and pulls together the annual update of the STIP and any modifications thereafter. And I'm going to expand a little on what Eric has already shared. STIP development occurs over time. It is updated on an annual basis, which begins with the public input and the needs prioritization, followed by the project programming and estimate updates. These lead to the final version of the STIP being presented at the July Commission meeting for approval. At this point, project changes can occur and amending actions are processed. So let's take a deeper dive into that. During the summer and fall months, districts work with our planning partners to evaluate system needs and to prioritize those needs so projects can be programmed in the STIP. Our planning partners, as Eric had mentioned, include the MPOs, our Metropolitan Planning Organizations, the RPCs, the Regional Planning Commissions, and multiple local officials. And then during the fall and winter, our district staff develop or update estimates for the projects. And lastly, in the spring, transportation planning pulls the development together for the final STIP. Based on the financial forecast that we receive from financial services each year, transportation planning calculates the STIP targets and typically provides them to the districts after the January commission meeting. These targets specify the amounts of funds each district receives to deliver their program. The districts are allocated funds according to the commission-approved funding distribution formula for asset management, safety, major bridge, and system improvements funds. To manage each district's share of the funds, transportation planning maintains balance sheets that are populated with each district's target amounts distributed for these funding categories. Asset management funds are used for projects such as pavement resurfacing, typical bridge improvements, or mobility projects such as ADA access, signing, or lighting improvements. Safety funds are used for safety-oriented projects which help to implement facets of the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. Major bridge funds are used or set aside for districts to help pay for their major bridge improvement projects. And system improvement funds are used to supplement asset management and can also be used to help deliver intersection or interchange improvements, auxiliary lane additions, bicycle and pedestrian improvements, or in limited cases, capital improvement projects. In the STIP, each district programs the total project budget, which includes estimates for preliminary engineering, right-of-way, construction, and construction engineering. However, only the estimates for right-of-way and construction are used in the balance sheet calculations to determine the use of distributed funds. Engineering is not deducted from the district STIP targets. Once the final STIP target packet is developed and shared with the districts, staff begin adding and updating projects in the TMS application, STIP Information Management System, commonly known as SIMS. This typically happens from December through February, and then the first week of March, we lock the system down to prohibit any further changes to the projects. This allows planning time to review all the changes and pull together the draft STIP. During February, the annual Planning Partners meeting is held to share a variety of information, which includes how the STIP is funded and how the funds are distributed. The District STIP Outcomes video conference is held in early April to allow the districts to share their program with management. And also, about the middle of April, the management review meeting is held and various reports are compiled by planning, which we share with management to complete this picture of the draft STIP. The draft STIP is then made available for a 30-day public comment period in May after being presented to the Commission. Public comments are summarized and presented to the Commission with a request for approval of the final STIP. The Commission-approved STIP is then submitted to WNDOT, comprised of FHWA and FTA, for their approval. At this point, when we begin allowing modifications to the STIP after the WNDOT, we start with August administrative amendments and administrative modifications. These are minor changes and consist of adding engineering-only projects or urgent projects, major or minor scope changes, project splits, adding right-of-way to an existing construction project, fiscal year changes, adding funding from others to projects, or technical corrections. Changes can be submitted for multimodal projects as well that impact transit, railroads, freight development, aviation, or waterways. Administrative amendments require chief engineer and WNDOT approval, and administrative modifications require chief engineer approval. Major changes can begin in September with the amendments. These changes include adding or deleting projects and budgetary project changes that exceed $1 million and 25% of the construction estimate and right-of-way program for the project. Amendments can be submitted for added or deleted federally funded multimodal projects as well. These level of amendments require commission and WNDOT approval. And it's very important to remember that any project changes occurring in the STIP must also be made to the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Programs in the MPO areas. Both the TIP and STIP have schedules that must be considered during project delivery. STIP changes process continues through March. Transportation planning has developed a STIP schedule, and amendments are processed for September, November, January, and March. Administrative amendments and administrative modifications are processed every month from August through March. And March is the last time STIP changes will occur on current fiscal year projects and for projects that are awarded in the first quarter of the following fiscal year. The annual STIP update picks up with any subsequent changes to projects after that. The schedule starts with the date of a project award, and we work backwards to determine the last possible date a project may be changed. To give you some insight into how long this process can take sometimes, if you have a project that awards in February, but it needs a full amendment, and you'll have to start this process for a November amendment, which requires information be entered into SIMS by mid-September. So you'll have to share information with your district planning staff to put information into SIMS for your project changes early on. Keep in mind, if a project falls within an MPO boundary, of course the TIP has to be changed as well, and there's schedules and due dates there. TIP changes are approved differently, and they actually have to go through their own MPO process as well as the governor's office before being submitted to WNDOT for approval. All projects must receive WNDOT approval, and the STIP and TIP must match as closely as possible so we avoid discrepancies, and then we also hope to avoid project delays. And all approved projects are then posted to the STIP website. The STIP includes approved projects for scoping, which we can include in Section 3, and then also projects for right-of-way and construction, which we include in Section 4 of the STIP. According to Commission policy, any project in Section 4 is a commitment to the public, and it must be delivered. Any deletion or removal of a project from Section 4 requires adequate justification to demonstrate that removal is the proper course of action. As you can see, the STIP is an important document that tells the public what projects we will be delivering over the 5-year period, and any changes can take a lot of time. Those are the information I'd like to share, so I'll hand this off to Leah Stadel.
Thank you, Monica. I'm going to talk about asset management. Just as a preview of what I want to talk about, I thought I'd kind of set some goals on what I can cover. And I'd like to make sure that I convey what asset management is. Why is it a priority? How does MoDOT go about approaching asset management? And what's considered in the plan? And then ultimately, how does this affect the STIP that Monica just talked about? So, So why do we do asset management? So MoDOT works with our planning partners and with transportation stakeholders around the state to establish a long-range transportation plan. And in addition to being a federal requirement, it's just good practice for us to understand what our customers want and need out of a transportation system. Over several iterations of performing this outreach and developing consensus on what we need to move forward with for transportation in our state, the idea of maintaining the system and services that we provide today continues to rise to the top and is one of the top priorities. Asset management is one of the strategies that MoDOT uses to deliver on that goal. So essentially our approach to what is an asset management plan? Well, it's essentially understanding all of the resources and assets that you have within your system and understanding the condition and understanding the goals that you need to for performance out of that system. So it's stepping back, looking at what you can do in terms of strategies that can help maintain that system in a condition that is preferred and is expected by the public. So as we look at all the vast network that we have and all of the different assets that we have to maintain, we have to look at the different approaches that can be used to keep those assets in good or better condition. And as we do that, different strategies come up. There may be things that we do that are long-term, like reconstruction, or more middle or short-term, which would maybe overlays or, different treatments. And then preventative, where we're kind of catching the condition earlier and trying to prevent it from falling out of good condition. But ultimately, we only have so much money. And so we have to, taking an asset management plan is essentially looking at what you can do, how you can do it, and what you need to accomplish within the budget that you have. So our approach to asset management is kind of relying on the resources that we have, which is district staff. They're the most familiar with the condition of the roads, what roads and bridges they have, what strategies are effective in their area, and some of the challenges that they have in maintaining those assets. So MoDOT transportation planning works with the districts to identify for their area what's going to put them in the best position to be successful in maintaining those assets. This leads to 9 separate asset management plans. Kansas City and Southwest both have a rural and urban area, and the funding is a little different, and so the plans are a little different. So when we take those 9 plans in aggregate, we're able to essentially develop the statewide plan. So as part of how we approach it and approach the strategies for asset management, it's interesting to see what a normal life of a pavement might be. So if you see the very long curve that has a steep portion and then starts to go out at the bottom, that's the normal pavement life. And so after you construct a project, that pavement, without any other intervention, is going to perform and maintain condition, relatively consistently. But if you are allowed that pavement to go out and don't touch it, and we construct it and use it, then that's kind of a build, use, replace scenario. And that's what the normal typical pavement life is that if you were to put it out there and not do anything in it, it has a useful service life, and at the end, you're probably going to have to start over. But there are other strategies. So if we step back and before that condition fell off so much that we are going to have to start over, if we use targeted approaches to lift the condition back up to good, and then we kept doing that over time, we're able to keep that pavement in a good condition for a longer period of time, and more than likely spend less money than the build, use, replace concept. With that in mind, you might think that, well, why wouldn't we just do preventive treatments everywhere on the system and then spend the least amount of money and keep everything in good condition? Well, the trouble is that we have assets around the state that are in a variety of conditions. And it's not quite as easy as that. So that's where we have to have a toolbox of different strategies to help maintain a condition of a pavement, help lift it up, and to essentially maintain those assets in a usable and workable way. And I use pavements because I tend to focus on pavements. That's what I'm most familiar with. But the idea of having a variety of strategies that help maintain an asset works for bridges and for some of the other inventory that we have to maintain throughout the state. So when the districts come up with the plans, it's not quite as easy as just saying, this is a resource or an approach that we want to take, and we're going to keep everything in perfect condition. Because of the variety of conditions, the variety of challenges that an individual district has, it can lead to having to make difficult decisions. So as the district looks at what resources they have, what strategies they can use, what their public is needing, and what their concerns are, what safety and emerging needs are out there for their districts, they have to make difficult decisions. But that's where an asset management plan comes in. Looking at a long-term window, looking at what's going to be coming up and what resources they have, and all the challenges that they're going to have spread over time helps them make good decisions today. And when all that comes together and it gets put together, it ends up becoming their asset management plan. So in terms of what the asset management plan is for the STIP, well, the reality is that we want the STIP programming to start with the asset management plan. It should be the foundation on which each district's project programming for a 5-year STIP starts, so that we ensure that the projects that are being put into the STIP are helping to support the goals of the asset management. And with that, I'm going to move on to Ray Shank.
Thanks, Lance. My name is Ray Shank. I work as a traffic safety engineer in the Highway Safety and Traffic Division. I'm going to be talking to you about use of some of our safety funds in programming safety projects in the STIP. So we have two different funding sources for safety funds. First is our Highway Safety Improvement Program funds, or HSIP funds. And to be eligible for those funds, it needs to be consistent. Projects need to be consistent with our strategic highway safety plan. They have to improve, have some sort of safety improvement. It also needs to be data driven. So we need to be treating the right locations with the right solutions, which drives us towards, this benefit cost or valuation of those projects. Minimally, we need to get that BC of 1, so we're getting that return on our investment. But just as kind of a rule of thumb, if you've got a benefit cost ratio of less than 3, you may want to, give it a little gut check and confirm that you guys feel that is the highest and best use of your safety funds. We also have Section 154 funds, or open container funds. This applies to Missouri because we do not have an open container law. And so there are specific federal funds that need to be geared towards safety improvements. Anything that is, or activities associated with the Highway Safety Improvement Program are eligible for these funds. So if it's eligible for HSIP funds, it should be eligible for open container funds. Now, thing to note with open container funds is that those will lapse after 1 year. So if you've got a safety project that's using open container funds, those funds need to be, and there's a change in scope and to where we don't necessarily need all those funds. we need those funds shifted to a different safety project to ensure that we do not lapse on those funds. Now, again, for projects to be eligible for safety funds, it needs to have solutions that are consistent with Missouri's Strategic Highway Safety Plan. This is a plan that we actually just updated this last fall that outlines our path forward to reducing fatalities and serious injuries on Missouri's roadways. This plan includes 4 emphasis areas of occupant protection, distracted driving, speed and aggressive driving, and impaired driving, or essentially buckle up, phone down, slow down, and drive sober. Now, those are really geared towards the driver themselves, but there are engineering strategies that are identified in this plan that can, 1, prevent that crash from occurring, or 2, reduce the severity of that crash. And we actually have more strategies for our engineering improvements than any other strategies outlined in that Strategic Highway Safety Plan. So if you've got a solution or an improvement that's going to reduce those severe crashes occurring on the system, more than likely it's going to be documented as strategy and be consistent with this plan. Now, as we are programming safety projects, there is a SIMS safety page where we ask for some additional information with regards to the benefits of that safety project. Particularly, we're trying to determine the number of lives saved and serious injuries reduced as a result of our safety program. We want to try, I think Lance mentioned in his presentation, we only have a limited amount of funds. We want to make sure that we're maximizing the value of those funds. Now, in order to come up with those numbers, you'll see that there's a link in the upper right-hand side of the SIMS safety page. That's going to take you to a SharePoint site on the Highway Safety and Traffic Division's SharePoint site, where it's really a one-stop shop for any safety analysis information you could think of. We've got various links and descriptions for guidance and tools and estimators that we have to, 1, identify potential locations for safety improvement, and then evaluating improvements for the crash situation that's occurring out there. And I just want to highlight some of the tools that we have available that you guys might find useful. First is the crash statistics map, which allows us to do some various querying. So as you're working with our internal and external partners on how we want to use these safety funds, we can pull up this map and query by district or MPO area, planning organization area. Are we interested in severe crashes, those that are occurring in a curve or at intersections? We have a lot of power to run these queries and get a very good sense of where the safety issues are occurring in any particular area. We also have our traffic safety list. So once our crash data gets complete via crash reports that Highway Patrol organizes, they share that information with us, and we can do this network screening of our entire system that allows us to highlight locations that have had crash experience. We have that broken down by various high severity locations, or did they occur within a curve or whatnot. And now those lists are just a list, but now what Kenny's showing on the screen here is we have that available as a layer in TMS maps as well, underneath a safety other layer. And you can plot these out on a map to give you a good sense of where the crashes are occurring. We also have a crash prediction tool, which utilizes the methodologies of the Highway Safety Manual. It is limited to just Rule 2-lane roadways currently, but what this has value in is it allows us to not overestimate or underestimate the amount of crash frequency that we would expect along a corridor. Those that might find value in this are those who are in districts that might not have a lot of high-risk locations identified on it. You know, those those fatal and severe crashes can kind of jump around a little bit. But this gives us a way to quantify some risk of severe crashes along a corridor, even though that experienced history might not necessarily be there yet. We also have several systemic countermeasures that we're trying to implement, and we have some safety estimator tools to help with those. Essentially, with this effort, we're trying to get these safety improvements in prior to those crashes occurring, and we're trying to treat locations with risk factors for those more severe crashes. We have estimator tools for where to install things such as chevrons, shoulders with rumble strips, and median guard cable. The median guard cable is shown on the screen right now, and just to give a sense of what we're talking about systemic, we can tie risk to the chance of a cross-median fatality to the amount of traffic on the roadway and the width of that median. So if you have a wide median with low amount of traffic, it's probably much a low-risk situation that you're going to have that cross-median crash. But if you have a lot of traffic and a very narrow median, much higher risk, and therefore the benefit of this improvement is going to be higher in those conditions. We can also implement strategies from the Highway Safety Manual, including HSM spreadsheets, ISAT-E, IHSDM. There's a slew of different resources there for us to try to evaluate and measure the level of performance that we would expect from a project. We can do this analysis both internally, but I do know on some projects we hire out consultants to do some of this work through a traffic impact study, and we can request that that consultant provide these numbers that we would want to feed into to our assessment of our safety program. And so when we put those all that information into SIMS, we are able to generate several reports. One of the reports is a STIP outcomes report, where after you guys finish creating the projects that you want to have in the next few STIPs, we can take a step back and look at, okay, what are our expectations for our crash reductions for this particular projects. We also report this information in a focus document that's been developed, where we're targeting solutions through data-driven safety analysis, ensuring that we're trying to maximize that value of our safety funds and drive down those severe crashes as fast as we can. This is just our third STIP cycle now that we're going to be applying this process. You can see that the first year there was pretty good volatility between the districts, and that's people learning the new analysis that we're trying to do. But I believe that we are making progress in refining this analysis and ultimately getting to a point where we're going to be able to program higher value projects into the future. And ultimately, our goal is to have zero fatalities on Missouri's roadways. And by being able to quantify these improvements, just as we've done last year, where we estimated the number of severe crashes reduced for the projects we have planned for 2021 to 2023, we're estimating that we're reducing those severe crashes by over 400. And with that, it just speaks to the hard work that you guys are doing to try to identify those high-value safety improvements, and we are going to continue on our way to driving those fatality numbers down, and appreciate all your efforts with that. And with that, I'll throw it back to Kenny.
All right, thanks, Ray. I'm going to talk a little bit about project scoping. So MoDOT STIP includes a section called Scoping and Design. The purpose of this section is to identify future highway and bridge projects to start scoping and preliminary design. These projects should be the highest priority needs identified through our planning framework process that Eric and Monica mentioned earlier. These projects are not a public commitment to construct or implement the improvement. This is a planning tool that allows MoDOT to get started on the work of a project before we make a public commitment. Once the project is added to this section of the STIP, the district can start scoping the project with internal staff or hire a consultant to identify a solution for the purpose and need of the project. Our goal is to get these projects scoped to a point that a solution is identified and a good estimate and schedule has been established. Once this is achieved, the project will be considered for addition to the construction program. Once a project is added to the STIP for construction, it is considered a public commitment. EPG section or Article 104 covers the steps in the scoping process. The first step is for the project manager to assemble a core team and begin to analyze the need to identify a solution. It is critical for the project manager to use this early scoping process to get input from all available resources to identify a solution. This step will also include analyzing risk to the project, like environmental considerations, right-of-way, utilities, railroads, and public involvement. These risks could impact what solution is selected for the project. These risks will also determine the schedule and budget for your project. There are also several tools in EPG Section 104, including a project scoping checklist. As you can see from this checklist, you are asked to identify, for example, whether right-of-way is required, and if it is required, how many parcels are required and how much right-of-way. When you answer these questions, it kind of makes some decisions for you. One, what type of environmental document is going to be required for that project? And then also, what kind of public involvement would be required for that project? And those all have impacts on your schedule moving forward. So it's important to identify that early in that scoping process before you make a commitment to the public of when it's going to be delivered and also how much it's going to cost. So here's a quick overview of the scoping process. There's an opportunity for us to scope a project before we make a public commitment, and that's the scoping and design section of the STIP. It's important we add those projects early on in the process so that we can have a good scope before we add it to construction. Once the project is scoped, we would add it to construction, and that becomes a public commitment. We want that scope to be, our goal is to have that scope up to preliminary plans if possible, and we want to be able to get there by using your core team to make sure that all the stakeholders that might be involved with that project are all on the same page and have a commitment to what that scope would be so that it doesn't change after that commitment is made to the public. We do have a process that allows us to amend the STIP, but we want to minimize those amendments as much as possible, and this scoping phase is the best way to do that and start that early. The other thing is make sure you use your EPG tools to identify potential risks during the scoping phase. EPG 104 and EPG 121.7 have a lot of tools that you can use to go ahead and develop that scoping for your project moving forward. So next up, we're going to have Laura Ellen talk about preliminary engineering.
Thanks, Kenny. I'm going to talk a little bit about engineering programming and consultant use today. I am the design support engineer and work in central office design, and I work with the consultant budget and doing the selection for on-call consultants and also just answering a variety of consultant questions. So when we're looking at programming a project or updating an estimate of a currently programmed project, we need to make sure that we look at engineering costs. Before estimating the engineering costs, available resources need to be considered. Are there sufficient in-house resources to complete the design and inspection of the project? You will need to talk to all departments that will be involved in the project to determine if the project will be completed by MoDOT staff or a consultant. The areas to consider include design, bridge, survey, geotech, environmental, right-of-way, and construction inspection. Any or all of these areas may use consultants. The resources may change if the project is programmed several years out, so be sure to consider this each year. For example, if you're programming a project for 2 or 3 years in the future, the construction department may say at first that they don't need a consultant, that they have the in-house resources to do the inspection. But as the project gets closer to that construction year, their resources may change, and that may influence if they need a consultant or not. So make sure that you consult all of those departments as you are updating estimates and programming projects. When you're determining typical engineering costs, first take a look at other projects in your district with similar scopes. Using recent information from your district will give the best estimate. Another resource is the Engineering Factors Report that's linked in section 121.7 of the EPG. And this is the same section that Kenny was referring to for other estimating information. If you look at the bottom corner of the screen, it's small, I know, but there's a screenshot of this section of the EPG. The Engineering Factors Report includes projects in the last 3 fiscal years that have actual construction costs. So these projects have already been constructed, so they can look at the percentage of engineering costs related to that construction cost. And these vary greatly depending on the type of project you have. It can be anywhere from 2 or 3% for a resurfacing project to up to 30% for a ADA project. So this gives you a kind of general guidance on programming that. But this includes both in-house in-house engineering and consultant engineering. So you need to make sure you take into account your resources, like I mentioned earlier, when you're doing this. A consultant does cost more than in-house engineering. You also need to take into account that when you do use a consultant, there will still be in-house costs associated with the management of the project. So as you're updating your projects this year, please make sure you include any consultant needs in the spreadsheet. I've linked it here. It's also been sent out to design, construction, the department heads, I think traffic also, and then many of the divisions also receive this. The consultant budget is a line item amount. For fiscal year 2020, the consultant budget is right now programmed at $55 million. And then we will use this spreadsheet to prioritize the consultant needs throughout the districts and departments. That's why it's very important that we keep this up to date, and it can be updated throughout the year if needs change. We may find that we hire in-house staff, or we may lose people, so some of the needs may change, or the project priorities and timelines may change also. So this will be kind of sets the budget for the year and gives us an information on what the needs are, but we are flexible and allow some changes throughout the year. And that's all I have on the engineering for right now, so I'm going to turn it over to Brenda Harris.
I'm Brenda Harris from Central Office Right-of-Way. I oversee the state for right-of-way situations and outdoor advertising. I'm going to talk about right-of-way estimates. To program right-of-way accurately, the use of project estimates at the 4 stages are very instrumental. Right-of-way estimates are also a requirement covered in the EPG or MoDOT policy and are mentioned in the Federal Highway Partnering Agreement. But primarily, they are a very critical component in achieving accurate overall project costs. Right-of-way estimates serve several purposes. Estimates help manage the right-of-way expenditures. They provide historical reference for accurately estimating future projects. Estimates are instrumental when assigning work to right-of-way staff and determining consultant usage, as Laura mentioned. And estimates are contributory when accurately determining project costs that allows MoDOT to schedule additional projects in the same program year and to use every available dollar. Right-of-way cost estimates should be prepared during the annual update and at other important milestones in coordination with the district right-of-way manager, the district design engineer, and the district transportation project manager. Requests for a right-of-way estimate should be submitted to the district right-of-way manager by memo and as outlined in EPG sections 121.7 and 236.3.3.2. If plans are unavailable, a detailed description and aerial map can be submitted with the memo for right-of-way staff to utilize in preparing the estimates. Right-of-way project estimates should be updated during every annual STIP update to reflect the details associated with a more detailed scope and preliminary plan development. Also at each project development stage, which I'm going to go into. The 4 project development stages for right-of-way include planning, programming, preliminary design, and final right-of-way design. These stages serve as benchmarks along a project timeline which coincide with the right-of-way process steps. For stage 1, we consider that the planning phase. A conceptual right-of-way cost estimate should be prepared by the right-of-way staff, which involves a market analysis conducted by the staff appraiser who reviews the location of the project and collects market data for real estate costs. This stage is prior to the project being included in the STIP for construction and during the original scoping early on. Stage 2 is the programming phase. This is a more in-depth right-of-way cost estimate that supports additional details derived from a scope and includes specifics such as the number of properties affected, identifying and considering the type of improvements such as homes, buildings, structures, whether relocation will be needed, the type and size of the community using an area trend which determines the more accurate market rate, and whether a property owner could potentially be more complicated to acquire or it involves several entities or LPA agencies or corporations. At this point, the project will be added to the STIP 5 years out from final development, unless it's been in the STIP for scoping. Title commitments should be ordered to determine property ownership in preparation for stage 3. Stage 3, the preliminary design phase, is similar to stage 2. However, it is more in-depth. Title commitments are utilized to assist in right-of-way cost estimates at this phase and are also used in preparation and development of the right-of-way plans. Project details associated with effects on realty are captured with this estimate. Details of acquisitions will be considered. Property owner information is reviewed to determine the complexity of the negotiations and any encumbrances or roadblocks that may need to be addressed to prevent issues during a project acquisition stage. Stage 4 is the final right-of-way plan phase. Plans are submitted to right-of-way staff for review and final adjustments before meeting with the property owners. At this time, the final estimate is prepared and reviewed to determine if program cost is appropriate or if adjustments should be made. This phase should be completed at the 2 or 3 year out STIP mark for construction. If the final plans are not submitted until the current project year, the STIP will need an administrative approval to increase or alter the right-of-way funds or to change the scope of the project. In some parts of the nation, right-of-way costs have escalated so quickly due to the complexity associated with condemnation and damage costs, but not in Missouri. In Missouri, we've seen program amounts far exceed the actual cost of a project. This tells us we are overestimating. This could be due to the delays in proper scoping, last-minute changes to a project, lack of communication between design and planning, or not involving the right-of-way staff in determining costs associated with the projects. Because of the overages in programming, MoDOT has left a lot of money on the table over the last few STIP cycles, which could have been used for additional projects. I now introduce Brian Hartnagel to cover the bridge programming.
Thank you, Brenda. So if you have a bridge project and you need an annual update estimate, we generally start with, in the fall, updating our pay item spreadsheet. And then we start annual estimate updates from October to the end of December. We like to have all of those to you in the district by the end of December. So who do you contact? Well, this is the first time we're rolling out this map here. In the past, we've had a map on our SharePoint page that shows you who your structural liaison engineer is. And we just developed this for several years in the Central District and the St. Louis District. we had aligned our structural project managers to their area engineers, or their transportation project managers were aligned by county or so on. So we decided to roll this out with the remaining 5 districts in the state. So if you're scoping your project, we still ask you to contact your structural liaison engineer. And I'm sure if you're in the district, you know who is assigned to your district. Our structural liaison engineers do handle consultant contracts throughout as they share workload. But when you ask for an estimate, copy your structural project manager, if it's in that county, and our structural resource manager, David Hagemeyer. So what do we need from you if you want an estimate? So if it's a rehabilitation or a redeck, visit EPG section 747.3.1.1, and we'll need a structural rehabilitation checklist. There's a screen grab of the front page of this thing. This form is typically filled out by your district bridge engineer along with your transportation project manager or transportation project designer. They go out there and decide what needs are on the structure that we're going to rehabilitate. Bridge division personnel would be happy to be invited to these site visits to help determine what necessary repairs are needed on the structure. And we can generally often send a preliminary designer, or maybe the project manager or one of our senior structural engineers would be happy to attend those structural rehabilitation checklist site visits. So what if you have a new bridge? If you have a new bridge, we ask you to look at the EPG 747.2, and this is the bridge survey section. And in that section, we have a couple checklists there so that your bridge survey that is submitted to us has all the information needed, so we can do, for example, if it's a stream crossing, you know, we need the hydraulic information and all of that, surveying. If it's a grade crossing or a railroad crossing, you know, we need some information about what is the elevations of the roadways that we're crossing, so we provide proper vertical and horizontal clearance and things like that. So that's the information that we need. We obviously like to have that before the October to December deadline so that we can use that to process the estimate. Now, the next thing to consider is, does your project have bridge involvement and you don't know about it? So if you have a paving or a safety project like Ray talked about and Lance talked about paving earlier, is your project going to need guardrail attachments to bridges? And if you look at section EPG 751.1.3.3 and 4, there's a real nice table there that shows you some bridge rails and what can be used in place and what cannot be used in place, what might need curb blockouts or thri-beam rails over culverts or things like that. So our transportation planning people, along with IS, created a really nice tool to search for your projects, and it's called the Bridge Data Zone. So you start off on the main TMS page there, and down there in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll click the Data Zone. And once you do that, there's a bunch of different things there, but select the Bridge button. And then the non-STIP bridges, and we couldn't come up with a good title of this, but it was really, we wanted a map that just showed the whole state. Now, shown here, this is in Internet Explorer, and down at the bottom, it's very important for this tool to work properly because there is some secure content and non-secure content in this map. The programmers from IS are aware of this issue, but you have to click the Show All Content when this map shows up. And before you go to the next slide, you'll notice that there's a search box where you can put in a bridge number or you can put in a job number. You leave the J off of the thing. And then down there in the bottom in the legend, you can select what fiscal years, what bridge projects. Right now on this map is shown the 2020 fiscal year, and the bridge projects are selected. So it shows roadway projects and bridge projects that are in 2020. Up there in the very top right corner, you'll see that it says aerial, and you can change that to aerial with the satellite photograph, or you can change it to road. So if you click show all content, then it'll go to the next page there, and it'll show you a map. And so this one here, I put in a job number in the search box there. I put in 5S3346, and you'll see and then I changed the fiscal years down there in the legend to just show 2022. And you'll show that for 5S3346, that job number, the little yellow flags are highlighting the route of that project. You'll notice in the bottom in the legend that I've also selected state structures. And so you have some red diamonds along the route that indicate where the bridges are. So if you're doing a paving project and you click on any one of these bridges, and I actually selected one that wasn't on the route, but that RO275 there, kind of in the top left corner, if you click on the bridge itself, it will show you all kinds of good information, deck rating, substructure rating, superstructure rating, the ADT of that route, when was the last time it was reconstructed, when was it originally built. This shows in that window on the right side that it was rebuilt in 2019, and we spent, or the programmed amount was $573,000 for that project. So there's a lot of good information you can get from this. And the reason I show you this tool is so if you have this paving project, 5S3346, your designers can look at this and say, okay, we need to deal with bridge number X0205, X0206, and all those other bridges. So contact our structural resource manager, David Hagemeyer, or if it's in a particular county, you can contact the project manager associated with that county. We can have our staff look at those bridges and say, don't pave over this bridge. You need to modify the guardrail ends on this bridge and all that stuff. So why is this important for the district personnel? One, it helps the bridge division personnel get that information early on, and these types of tasks can usually be done in a short amount of time, but they are generally worked in when our technicians and our designers have spare time to work on them. If you drive this route at the very end of the project and you notice these bridges and we've got to do all this work and the plans are due in 3 weeks, then it becomes an issue. And then the other problem that it poses is oftentimes the districts didn't program any bridge money, and then they get in trouble from transportation planning or whoever when there's bridge cost and there's no bridge money program. So we created this tool to help you guys help us to serve your needs. So if we go on to the next slide, when do you schedule bridge projects? Typically, everybody wants to schedule all their bridge projects in January and February so that they can hit the ground running with March and April awards and construction season starts and they get going. But we would like you to spread them out from September to May, and this does a couple things. One, we have limited staff, so we can't review 120 bridge projects in just for January and February lettings. But probably more importantly is we have a number of bridge contractors in the state. In order to get the best prices, we would like all of them to get work so that they can have work to do. And by spreading them out, we typically get more bidders and more better prices for that. We typically get 4 to 12 bidders on bridge projects, and then this allows them to plan their work and fill up their crews for the whole season. And there is work that can take place in the winter months, you know, typically destruction of bridges, removal of bridges, things like that, any grading that's associated with the and so on can be done in the winter months, and there's often days that are able to be worked through too. We ask that when you program bridge projects that you please add an award month. This is another thing that helps us with our limited amount of resources. If you put it in fiscal year 23 and don't put an award month in the STIP programming window, what we assume is that will be awarded in July of 2023. And so that means our staff are considering how we're going to address the needs of that project for a July award or a June letting. Now, if you do put an award month in there, and let's say you award it in April, that gives us about 8 or 10 more months to prioritize our limited resources. So when you do put something in the STIP for programming, we do ask that you put in an award month for us to help us plan our resources. So that's all I have, and I'm going to turn it over to Patrick Hake.
Thank you, Brian. Can everybody hear me? I hope.
Yep, I can hear you.
All right, thank you. My name is Patrick Hake. Like Brian said, I'm the review and estimate engineer in the bidding and contract services section and design. Talking about the roadway programming, there are several ways to come up with a cost per project. Two of our most common ways is the cost-based and historical-based estimating. The cost-based estimating looks at individual parts that could make up a pay item, such as equipment, material, labor, and overhead and profit. Historical-based estimating uses bid history to determine the unit price for each pay item in your project. For programming estimates, you want to focus on the historical prices, but some pay items in your project may need some more attention than just history. So your best tool when estimating is using bidtabs.net. It is available to everyone, designers, transportation designers, and project managers. The software is a database of all the pay items from awarded projects. It doesn't include any prices from rejected projects. So if you had jobs that got, or if we had calls that got rejected, those prices that the bidders bid on, they're not included in our database. This database is updated a few weeks after the commission meeting every month. And if you haven't opened up bidtabs.net in a while, it may take some time to upload those prices, or if there's any updates to the system that's been made. After you have established your project in bidtabs.net with pay items, you can load comparisons for those items. Setting up a couple different comparisons is recommended. The most common comparisons are the district and statewide comparisons. From most comparisons, the district, there's other comparisons too. There's that may be used, such as similar projects that may be better to use than the statewide comparison. If you're using a similar project, make sure the project that you're comparing to should have similar length, width, thickness, crossings, etc. When determining your parameters that you're going to run for for each comparison, there's a couple inputs that you need to choose from. The first one is the pay items. This is all your pay items that you have identified in your project, or you could pick specific pay items that you want to look at. You can select, the items to select is the prices or the number of bidders that you want to include. This includes all the prices. It can include the low only, the low 2, 3, 4, or 5. Next is selecting the location. Options include by county, region, or by population area. The region is set up by districts, and then all is the statewide, whether it's all counties, all regions, or districts, or all populated areas. The populated area is determined by urban or rural population area, if you choose that. The next is to select the time frame. There are 3 options for that. There's a predefined range, specific dates, and specific years. In the predefined range, there's a choice of 6 months, the last 6 months, or the last 12 months. You can also pick the last 2, 3, 4, or 5 years, and there's also an option to click or choose the current or last year. For specific dates, it's letting to letting dates. So this could provide fiscal year report data for you if you choose that, or if you choose the specific year, that's by calendar date. And the next thing you want to choose from is the quantities. To set those, it's a quantity factor that will apply a percentage that you input below or above the quantity in the project. So for an example that's listed there, for a district estimate that you may run, you want to choose all your items that you've identified in your project. You may want to choose the low only, choose your district, and you may choose the last 3 years, and then your quantity set would be plus or minus 20%. So when that's run, all your pay items that you've listed in that project, the data that we'll pull in will be for those pay items that were bid on the last 3 years that have a quantity that's plus or minus 25% of the quantity that's specified in your job for the low only. After that, the baseline estimate can be generated from the report. A price for every pay item will be needed. As you can see on these items, there's not much difference between the unit bid price for the district and the statewide average. For the gravel or crushed stone pay item, the district average is around $41, and the statewide average is around $39. It would be perfectly reasonable to use $40 for this pay item on this project. For most pay items, you can select the unit price from this report. There are some pay items that may not have no prices. This doesn't mean there's no history. It's just that there's no history based on the parameters that was selected. You may want to run a pay item search and redefine your parameters to get a price for those items if there's no prices that show up on this report. There are pay items that you will need to focus on and use more engineering judgment. Items of focus. I'm sure you've heard of the 80-20 rule. Well, it's the Pareto principle or distribution. This means approximately 20% of the pay items make up about 80% of the cost. Those are the pay items that you should focus on, and it's typically the major items of work. Still using your bidtabs.net, you will run a pay item search and refine your quantities and area to come up with a cost. The report will have averages for the parameters that are established. There are prices for above and below that price. There's low and high bids that we received on those pay items, and it provides an average. Other aspects to consider on the major items of work are time restrictions, entrances, intersections, traffic volumes, urban or rural. There's more risk in the job than that tends to be more costs associated with it. So when you're looking at your projects, once you start coming up with some final decisions on how you're setting the job up, remember the cost, and more risk tends to be more cost. One of the items that can be difficult to determine is lump sum items. Typically, history does not give an accurate price on this. It varies quite a bit from project to project. The common lump sum items for most projects are the removal of improvements, mobilization, and contractor surveying and staking. For the removal of improvements, it's recommended to put a cost for each of the items that you've listed in the plans. Most of the time, you can come up with a cost for those. You can, if you're replacing, say, a pipe, and you know the installation cost of that, you know that the price for removal isn't going to be as high as that price that you looked up on history, because that price in history is all inclusive material costs, labor and equipment, etc. So for a removal price, it would be something less than that. Mobilization should be the last thing that you determine, and it includes all the costs in the project, including any bridge items. For the contractor surveying and staking, this is another lump sum item. It's mainly used for grading and bridge work. You want to determine if you have this in your project, you want to determine what it is going to be used for the project. It can vary from a couple $100 to a couple $1,000 or more. Scheduling. Now that you have a solid estimate, you're ready to add the project to the STIP and pick a letting date. There's some recommendations on picking a letting for various types of work or types of projects. These projects can overlap. The key in picking a date is plan around your schedule. For instance, if you're going to be gone in September, don't schedule your project to be let in September or October. You will need to be available between the submittal time and the letting of the project for questions. Also, having a core team meeting, as discussed earlier, and discuss the schedule is great. See if there's enough time to get all the right-of-way cleared, the NEPA process, determine if there's any local festivals, parades, and fairs that will hinder the construction of the project or anything else that can impact the schedule of the project. Balance your workload with the district lettings and the statewide lettings. During the STIP annual update, we will look at the summary of dollar value, the number of projects, and number of bridges per letting, and we'll send it out to everyone. Having unbalanced lettings, like Brian said earlier, is hard on not just our staff internally, but also the contractors when they're trying to submit bids and get the work done. Innovative contracting, a few innovating contractors that can hit your program amount when you're setting it. You may choose to include any of these incentives for your project. For projects that have necessary milestones, it can be beneficial to provide an incentive for achieving those milestones. EPG Section 237.8 contract time gives more detail on the different incentives and disincentives that may be used. For positive reinforcement, there are two incentive methods that will impact your program if used. A+B bidding, or acceleration of the work clause, is where the contractor bids the number of days to complete the milestone or the work. The days bid by the contractor is factored in the award of the contract. If the contractor completes the work in advance of those days, he will receive a bonus equaling to the number of days under multiplied by the road user cost. If the contractor completes the work beyond the days they specified, they will be assessed damages equaling to the number of days over multiplied by the road user cost. The other, liquidated savings, is the number of days in which a milestone or the work shall be completed is specified in the contract documents. The contractor will receive a bonus and the amount of days completed multiplied by the road user cost. In both cases, there should be a maximum bonus or dollar amount that the contractor should receive or could receive, those are included. It should be included in the contract documents. These are all attached to the project costs that need to be considered when setting the program. Another innovative contract technique that could be used is ad alternates. Add alternates are intended to be used to fully utilize the program amount. EPG section 142.7 covers in detail the use of add alternates. If used, keep it simple, 1 or 2 add alternates for your project. And with that, Todd Miller is up covering program maintenance programming.
All right, thank you, Patrick. Well, my name's Todd Miller, as Patrick said. I am in the MoDOT maintenance division. I'm a liaison engineer. One of my previous roles was the STIP program manager. But now in the maintenance division, one of the many things I do is develop and report on our STIP maintenance and operations section of the STIP. Before I go into that, though, I want to talk a little bit about what can you do in order to get a project in the STIP from your operating budget. And I'll kind of throw a scenario at you. We seal bridge decks every year in-house in MoDOT. We try to do 10 to 20% of the bridge decks every year. We try to seal them up. This is a preventive maintenance effort. It's typically done between every 5 to 7 years with bridges. So a very important effort that we have to preserve some very expensive assets that are on our system, these bridges. But let's say you have a situation where every year we purchase the sealing material and we apply that sealant ourselves. Let's say in the off season we find that the equipment that we have to seal our bridge decks has broken down, and we have not ordered our bridge sealing material yet. Well, that would be a good opportunity to go ahead and utilize a STIP to perform that work since you are not in a position to perform it. So essentially the budget or the org that you would have used to purchase the sealant material, which you will not be doing now because your equipment is broken down and it's projected to be broken down all season long. You essentially would perform a budget transfer from that org to CPX or contractor payments, or essentially the STIP org, perform that budget transfer of a certain amount, let's say $100,000. And essentially that budget transfer would be the documentation to essentially provide funding from other sources in the STIP. So essentially the STIP's programming balances aren't impacted by this project. So then that project, adhering to all the information that you've gained so far in this class, that project could then proceed forward, get programmed, and rather than performing the bridge deck sealing in-house, it could be performed through the STIP with a contractor. So just a real quick note on how projects that are maybe sometimes or are typically performed in-house can be programmed through the STIP and some of the steps involved with that. Now let's jump to the actual STIP. We call it the operations and maintenance section of the STIP. 5 years ago, our director felt very strong that we needed to communicate to the public what we do with our operations funds. Now, our operations funds are in the neighborhood of about $500 million. So it's a very large expenditure that goes towards winter operations, asphalt pavement repair, bridge deck sealing, as I mentioned earlier, pavement sealing in the form of chip seals and various other types of sealant products. So that's where the money goes. We have over 2,000 staff throughout the state, our boots on the ground, our operations staff and operators that perform this work. So again, an expenditure of around $500 million annually, a very large expenditure. So we communicate this in the operations section of the STIP. Again, this has been in existence now. This will be our 5th year of providing this. Essentially, we communicate what it is we do with that. The process that we go through in order to come up with the work that we show in the operations section of the STIP is a process that we've been going through for years and decades. Essentially, what we do in the wintertime for the upcoming first year is we develop budgets for the upcoming season. How much are we going to chip seal? How much money are we going to spend on bridge decks? So we've gone through that budgeting process for years now. So what we've done in the last 5 years is we've taken that budgeting process and we've expanded it and formalized it to where we have a plan in place that shows where all the chip seals are going to occur, where all the asphalt pavement repair is going to occur, where all the bridge deck seal is going to occur. And not only do we have it now for just the first year, which would be the first calendar year of the STIP, but now we ask that they also plan out for the next 2 years beyond that. Essentially, what we ask for is for the first year, we would like to have at least 80% of what you typically do planned out. So if you do $100 million in asphalt pavement repair, we ask that you have planned for presentation in the operations section of the STIP, you have planned at least 80% of that. So if it's $100 million, it would have to be at least $80 million would have to be identified in our plans in the first year. Now, the second year, we only ask that you identify 60% of that. So $60 million in the second year needs to be identified. And then finally, the third year, we ask that 40% of what you typically do, let's say, again, $100 million is a typical asphalt pavement repair, we ask that you have 40% identified in the third year or the third calendar year of the STIP. One thing about the operations section of the STIP, it is a little different than the rest of the STIP. We do perform our work more or less in a calendar year environment. So it is communicated that way. We do not list all of our work in a tabular format at this time. We simply have it mapped in the STIP to show and to communicate all the work that we do that's planned in the STIP for every district, which again includes asphalt pavement repair, chip seals, bridge deck seals, concrete pavement repair, and bridge deck repair, and pipe replacements. So all that work that we typically plan, we communicate that in the STIP, with some exceptions. We plan other work such as striping, such as bridge flushing. We plan this work, but it is so widespread, there's no need to really map it. We flush every bridge at least once every season. So really, if we map that, it would just be a map of all of our bridges. And same with striping. We might not stripe everything, but we stripe a large part of our system every year. So really, a map of that striping plan would pretty much just show almost our entire system. So that is really what we communicate in the STIP. Now, in addition to this planned work, we also have unplanned work, and that can include a lot of things. Emergency response. One of the biggest things is winter operations. Now, we do talk about that in the operations section of the STIP, and we talk about some typical expenditure levels. What's interesting about winter operations is there's actually, in my tenure of heading up winter operations, which is only back to 2016, we've had a $50 million swing in what we spend in winter operations. We've spent as little as $25 million in one particular year, and we've spent as much as $80 million in another year. So there's a $50 million swing, a $50 million question mark in our budget every year. So that being said, that's one of the reasons why what we have in the operations portion of the STIP, it isn't chiseled in stone as much as our projects that are actually in the program of the STIP, because we do have that $50 million swing, and we do have a lot of unknowns that can pop up, biggest of which being winter operations. So that's really, and finally, most importantly, I want to talk about how do we get that information in from the districts. And I really want to talk about that. As you can see, we have a newly developed, really we've been developing in the last 3 years, our maintenance management system, MMS. Before, like I told you, the budgeting was essentially done on spreadsheets. They were all brought in. They were emailed to us in the central office. We did have a pavement planning tool that we used for some of the aspects of the work. There was really a whole wide range of communication and manipulation and putting things together. Now we put it all in one place called our maintenance management system. And that is essentially, now that is a tool to communicate what your plans are for the upcoming season, for all the different work that you do. And it also will track as well how much work is performed, how much of the work that was planned is accomplished. So this tool is now our tool moving forward. And really, this is our first year. This is our first year where all our information is being brought in through the maintenance management system. One other interesting aspect about operations and maintenance, it is all state funded, or it has been in the past, almost entirely state funded, with the exception of the emergency response activities that we get involved in, and those would get reimbursed through the federal ER program. But in 2013, we initiated a program that was available with FHWA called essentially the in-house, or FHWA refers to it as force account, or in-house, our own staff, preventive maintenance work on our system. So that can include chip seals, that can include asphalt pavement repair on relatively good pavements, definitely bridge seals. So FHWA, they participate 80% in those efforts that are performed in-house. There are a lot of things that we have to do to assure them that we are good stewards of the money. We have to show that we are comparable or competitive with contract pricing. We have to show them that we do have a plan. We don't just go out and just seal whatever. And we do have to show that we do have an inventory of what's out there, and we are truly keeping good assets good, as opposed to just applying preventive maintenance on assets that are already bad. So that's been in place since 2013. The first year we reimbursed about $300,000. In the last couple of years, we've been reimbursing over $60 million with this program. So essentially, we took something that was nothing. We got no federal funds whatsoever, and now we're able to leverage over $60 million a year in federal funds. So that's the maintenance operations part of the STIP. I will go ahead and now turn it back to Kenny Voss for any questions and closing of the meeting.
All right. Thank you, Todd. Great job, all presenters today. I really appreciate the effort of sharing this information with all of our MoDOT staff across the state. One of the things that's important to recognize with this conversation is it's a lot of work to put together a STIP. There's a lot of information there, but it's really important that we put in that effort and time to make sure that that commitment that we're making to the public is accurate and that we can meet that commitment moving forward. So I know a couple of things that were talked about by the various presenters was, maybe start your work or provide your questions or your information to, say, the bridge division staff or right-of-way staff in the fall. But there's also a schedule for whenever those targets are sent out there. Well, our targets are typically pretty close to the same every year, so you can go ahead and work on the projects you're going to do an annual update on for the next year. You can start out those throughout the year and then submit that information early. Some districts actually have that scheduled so that they update their existing projects that are in the STIP in October, and then they work on their other projects after October. So any new projects they want to add are started after October, and they work on those through March whenever the STIP is submitted. So some ideas for you all to kind of spread the workload out throughout the year. At this time, we're going to be taking questions. As I said early when we started this webinar, there is a question and answer kind of bot that's down there. And you just put your question in there and select all presenters, and that will go to all the panelists that are out here to answer the question. So at this time, I'll go ahead and start reading those off and try to answer those verbally, and then we'll take verbal questions from there. So the first question I have is from Kirsten Monk, and is BidTaps.net available to construction staff to assist in determining if contingent item prices are reasonable as part of the change order process? I'm going to go ahead and let Patrick Hake answer that question.
Yeah, the bid tabs is available to everyone. So if anybody needs bid tabs, you can contact myself or Danica Stovall Taylor. It's basically just a website that you'll have to go to and register with Omen. There's a customer ID and a serial number that you'll have that will be provided in the email. I sent out when we went to the new bidtabs.net. I sent out a email to the districts on that. So if anybody has that or anybody comes to you and asks it and you have it, you can forward that email to them also, and it'll work for them.
All right, Patrick, another question for you was how often is bid tabs data updated?
Yeah, so the bid tabs are updated a few weeks after the commission meeting, since they award or reject all of our projects. Once the commission awards or rejects any of our projects, that's when we post the PDF bid tabs out on our website, and then that goes to Omen to be able to import it into their system, and it takes a few weeks for that to get updated. So if you haven't used it in a while, bid tabs in a while, when you open it up, it'll ask you if you want to update, and you want to say yes, and it'll update the new tabs, and you can check that by clicking on the specific date tab, and the most current letting would be on there. So in this case, our most current letting that we had was December, and the commission meeting was, what was it, the beginning of January. So in a couple weeks here, look for December to be in there, if it's not already.
All right, thanks, Patrick. I don't see any other questions in the Q&A, so we'll go ahead and open up the questions, any verbal questions. So in WebEx, there's a ability to raise your hand, and we will be looking to see if anybody raises their hand, and then Jessica will unmute you to ask your question.
Okay, Kitty, it looks like there's 4 question marks. I'm not sure if they have a question or not. So first I'm going to unmute Travis to see if you have a question. Travis, do you have a question?
No, I don't have any questions. I don't know how I did a question mark.
Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and mute you again, Travis. Thank you. And then it looks like Joseph Alderson, do you have a question?
I did type 1 about, I'm not even sure what we would call it, 3% guideline rule for cost changes. Could you explain that?
I can give that a go. All right, so the 3% is the tolerance that we want the program to grow. You know, we don't want it to grow more than 3%. Districts programs, as they program their list of projects as a total, we look to see where they are in relation to the movement of those jobs. So if your project's moving through the STIP, you know, and you're going to build it in 3, we don't want to see that project estimate grow more than 3% as you update it from what you initially programmed. Did I say that right, Monica?
That's right. We look at it on a program basis, though. We'll review all the projects, but we look at them as a whole for your whole program of what's rolling from one STIP to the next.
Right. Some may go up, some may go down, but in totality, your total district program can't grow more than 3%.
Right.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Now I'm going to go to Mary Trotter. Mary, did you have a question? Mary, are you there? Okay, it looks like Mary is not here. Next, we'll go to Robert Mason. Did you have a question?
No.
You didn't have a question?
No.
Oh. Okay, thank you. All right, Kenny, it does not look like any hands are raised, so I'm assuming there is, oh, one moment. Looks like Duke has a question. Duke, do you have a question? Are you there, Duke?
Jessica, he typed it in the question box. He
Okay,
doesn't have a microphone.
Okay, thank you. So that has been addressed.
No, it hasn't. The question is in the question box.
Okay, so where does the money for PE and CE come from for the asset management plan that goes into the STIP?
The sky. I'll try this one. So I think what you're talking about is PE for the STIP. You know, in my mind, that's the DBC budget that folks ask for, consultant services and those kinds of things. And it's in the PE internal is our payroll. Is that right, Kenny? I say that about right?
Yeah, and I think also the other good point to say is that, you know, it comes off the top now before we distribute it out to the districts, right?
That's right. That's right. Yep. You see the financial forecast, it lists that out before the remaining funds to be distributed is allocated, and it is taken off based on an estimate that program deliveries team does with executive team on how much is needed for DBC and internal design work.
Is that all the questions, Jessica?
Yes, that's all that I see, Kenny.
All right. So if we didn't get to your questions today, feel free to reach out to any of today's presenters. I hope today's presentation provided a better understanding of your role in developing MoDOT STIP. Thank you for participating. We appreciate your feedback in these webinars. So if there's anything we can do to improve the format or the content in future webinars, please reach out to any of us and we will gladly take your input. I want to remind everyone that our next webinar is on public involvement. It is scheduled for February 18th. I don't know if that's in MoDOT-U yet, but that's something we just recently added. We also have another webinar planned on pavement design later on in February. I believe it's the 25th. So at this time, we will wrap up this webinar. We will be registering everyone that participated in MoDOT-U today. The WebEx system allows us to track who is attending by computer, but does not allow us to see who called in by phone. If you are in attendance but did not sign in by WebEx, please contact Jessica and she'll go ahead and get you the credit you deserve for this training. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you for your participation.